I watched in stunned silence as Mike Bennett's words cut through me like a blade. "We can get 3 junior engineers for your salary, Jack," he said with that irritating smirk, casually erasing 18 years of my life as if deleting a corrupted file. I never thought 55 would feel like this. After nearly 2 decades of my life poured into Richardson Housing, the bitter taste of betrayal lingered on my tongue as I drove home from the final meeting. Back in 2005, when Henry Richardson himself hired me, the company operated out of a converted Victorian house with exactly 6 employees and a couple of ancient Dell computers. "Jack Wheeler," Henry had said, shaking my hand firmly, "I need someone who can build something lasting." His eyes had crinkled with sincerity, and I believed him. Those early years were something special. My tiny server room was actually a converted pantry, and I'd spend nights coding by the glow of my monitor, designing systems that could track maintenance requests, process rent payments, and eventually manage entire properties. Every line of code felt like laying another brick in a foundation that would stand the test of time. "Jack's magic again," my colleagues would say when a new feature rolled out. Even my wife, Claire, understood my dedication, bringing dinner to the office during those marathon coding sessions. "You're building something important," she'd remind me, squeezing my shoulder. By year 10, Richardson Housing managed 37 properties across 2 states. I built a custom management system RH Pulse that handled everything from tenant applications to maintenance workflows. The company grew because of that system, because of my work. Henry knew it too. He'd stopped by my office, now a proper room with 4 monitors and natural windows, just to chat about what improvements we could make next. "You remember when we tracked maintenance requests with paper forms?" I'd asked him once, laughing. "I remember when we tracked them with my faulty memory," he'd replied with a chuckle. I recalled the day Henry announced his retirement. Something tight formed in my chest as he gathered everyone in the conference room. "My son Tyler will be taking over," he'd said, his hand trembling slightly as he held his coffee mug. "But remember, you're all family to me." Family. The word echoed in my mind as I pulled into my driveway, now on employment papers on the passenger seat beside me. Tyler had been different, always in a hurry, always talking about scaling and market penetration. He'd lasted 2 years before selling to Apex Partners, the private equity firm that brought in their possession of consultants with expensive suits and cheap ideas. "We need to document these systems better," I told Mike Bennett during his first week as CTO. I still remembered his dismissive wave. "We'll get to that. First, let's look at where we can optimize costs." 6 months of suggestions for optimization followed, none of which included the documentation I've been begging for since Henry left. Just weekly meetings where MBA graduates who couldn't troubleshoot a printer asked why our custom property management system couldn't just be replaced with something off the shelf. "It's integrated with everything," I'd explained countless times. "It's handling 63 properties now across 4 states, with specific workflows for each local market. You can't just swap it out like changing a light bulb." They never listened. Instead, they brought in those 3 kids fresh out of coding bootcamp: Adam, Caitlin, and Ev. Nice enough, but completely overwhelmed by the complexity of what I'd built over 18 years. I did my best to train them, knowing somehow that my own clock was ticking. "Why is this section written this way?" Adam had asked, pointing to a crucial payment reconciliation module. "Because we never had the resources to refactor it properly," I'd explained. I requested a dedicated documentation sprint every quarter for 5 years, check the project records. Now, sitting in my quiet house, I stared at the severance paperwork, 2 months' pay for 18 years of service. My phone buzzed with a message from Ryan, still on the inside. "They're already lost without you, Jack. The new kids have no idea how any of this works." I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I just felt hollow. The first red flag appeared 3 months after Mike Bennett became CTO. I was working late, the office emptied of everyone except the cleaning staff, when I noticed him lingering outside my door. "Jack, got a minute?" Mike's voice carried that artificial friendliness I'd grown to distrust. I swiveled in my chair, gesturing to the empty seat across from my desk. "What's on your mind?" "We're thinking about bringing in some fresh talent," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Young blood, you know, people who've trained on the latest frameworks." Something cold settled in my stomach. Latest frameworks won't help much with our Pulse, this custom built from the ground up. Mike's smile tightened. "That's part of what I wanted to discuss. The board feels our systems are overly complicated." I remember laughing, actually laughing at the absurdity. Complicated. They are handling millions in transactions across 4 states with different tax codes and regulations. They are supposed to be complicated. The next week, they introduced Adam, Caitlin, and their bright-eyed kids barely old enough to rent cars. "Jack will be showing you the ropes," Mike announced, his hand on Dev's shoulder like a proud father. For weeks, I tried teaching them the intricacies of what I'd built. The backdoor solutions I'd implemented when the company refused proper development time. The workarounds hard-coded into critical functions because Henry had always said, "Make it work now, we'll clean it up later," though later never came. "This section handles the reconciliation between tenant payments and bank deposits," I explained one afternoon, pointing to lines of code on my screen. It's a bit unconventional. Why not just use standard accounting libraries? Caitlin asked, her tone innocent but the question loaded. Because when I wrote this in 2009, we were handling property acquisitions weekly. The board wanted functionality yesterday, not next quarter, I said, trying to keep the edge from my voice. I requested time to refactor this code 8 separate times over the years, check the project logs. One Tuesday morning, I arrived to find my keycard access restricted to only my floor. Ryan from accounting caught me at the coffee machine, his voice slow. They had a closed-door meeting yesterday about the legacy systems, he whispered. Mike kept saying phrases like technical debt and hostage situation, said someone was intentionally making systems too complex to maintain. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my home office surrounded by binders of documentation I'd created on my own time, documentation the company had never allocated resources to digitize or distribute. Claire found me there at 3 a.m., staring at a diagram of database relationships I'd drawn by hand. They're going to get rid of me, I said, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. 18 years, and they are going to throw it all away. She squeezed my shoulder, that same supportive gesture from all those late nights. Then they'll learn what you're worth the hard way. The meeting came 2 weeks later. I was called to a conference room I'd helped wire for video capabilities years ago. Mike sat beside Janine from HR, both wearing practiced expressions of corporate regret. Jack, as part of our ongoing restructuring, we're eliminating your position, Janine began, sliding a folder across the table. We're offering a severance package of 2 months' salary considering your tenure. 2 months for 18 years, I repeated, the words feeling like stones in my mouth. Mike leaned forward, his cologne too strong in the small room. The reality is we can hire 3 junior engineers for what we're paying you. Nothing personal, just business. I thought about the undocumented failsafes buried in critical systems. The custom scripts that kept everything running smoothly. The forgotten server in the basement that handled all property tax calculations that nobody but me even knew existed. You've been declining our request to simplify the systems for months, Mike continued. If the architecture was more accessible, perhaps this conversation would be different. I thought about Henry Richardson's words from all those years ago. I need someone who can build something lasting. What would he think of his legacy now? You need to sign these today, Janine said, tapping the folder. Your access will be terminated at 5. As I walked back to my desk to collect my family photos and coffee mug, I passed the 3 junior engineers huddled around a monitor, their faces furrowed in confusion as they stared at a cascade of error messages they couldn't begin to understand. I didn't need to sabotage anything. The system would collapse under its own weight without proper maintenance. All those years of denied requests for proper documentation and refactoring were about to become a technical debt that would demand immediate payment. Ryan caught me at the elevator, his face pale. This is insane, Jack. You know they're prepping for another sale, right? Mike's been promising the board he can streamline everything to make the company more attractive to buyers. I just nodded, clutching my cardboard box of belongings. How long do you think they'll last without me? Days, Ryan whispered. Maybe weeks if they're lucky. As the elevator doors closed, I felt something unexpected, not anger or even sadness, but a quiet, certain knowledge that sometimes revenge doesn't need to be planned. Sometimes it simply arrives in the form of consequences. I sat at my kitchen table 3 days after my termination, nursing a cold cup of coffee and scrolling through job listings when my phone lit up with Richardson Housing's main office number. I let it ring through to voicemail. Twice more it rang that morning. By afternoon, the calls were coming from Mike's personal cell. The first system to fail had been the payment processing portal. I knew this because Claire's friend Debbie worked in accounting and texted me about the chaos. Nobody can figure out why the reconciliation system is rejecting valid payments, she wrote. Mike's team is freaking out. I smiled for the first time in days. That system ran through the forgotten basement server, the one I'd repeatedly begged to replace but was told wasn't in a budget. It required a manual restart every 72 hours, a quirk documented only in my personal notes. On day 4, Ryan called during his lunch break, his voice hushed and frantic. Jack, it's a complete nightmare. The maintenance request system is down. We've got elderly tenants with broken heaters and no way to track work orders. Mike's team keeps saying they're close to a fix, but they're drowning. That's unfortunate, I reply, feeling a strange hollowness where satisfaction should have been. He's blaming you, Jack. In meetings, he's telling everyone you deliberately sabotaged the systems. My knuckles whitened around my coffee mug. I didn't touch a thing. They're failing because nobody maintained them properly, exactly what I warned about for years. That evening, my doorbell rang as Claire and I were finishing dinner. Through the peephole, I saw Mike Bennett standing on my porch, his normally slick appearance now disheveled, tie askew, hair and comb, dark circles under his eyes. Jack, please, he said when I cracked the door. We need your help. The entire tenant portal is offline. None of the documentation makes sense. We'll pay you $300 an hour as a consultant. I leaned against the doorframe. I recall requesting additional resources for documentation 8 times over 3 years. Each time, you personally denied it, saying it wasn't cost-effective. That was before. Look, we'll make it $500 an hour, whatever you want. Behind his desperate plea, I glimpsed not just the technical failure but the human cost. Thousands of residents without functioning systems, maintenance workers unable to access critical information, elderly tenants with legitimate needs. For a moment, I felt a tug of responsibility for systems I'd birthed and nurtured for nearly 2 decades. Then I remembered the cardboard box, the 2-month severance, the nothing personal as they discarded 18 years of my life. I'm afraid I have an interview tomorrow, I said, my voice steady. And preparations to make tonight. Jack, please, the company is imploding. The executive team is in emergency meetings. We could lose everything. A memory flashed through my mind, sitting alone at 2 a.m. on Christmas Eve 2012, manually restoring databases after a server crash while the executives who denied my upgrade requests celebrated at holiday parties. I remembered every weekend sacrificed, every vacation interrupted by urgent calls, every system bandaged together because proper solutions were deemed too expensive. Sometimes, I said quietly, technical debt comes due all at once, Mike, nothing personal, just business. His face flushed red. You son of a bitch, you did this on purpose. I built those systems to the best of my ability with the resources I was given to requested proper documentation protocols 17 times over 5 years. I have the emails. I didn't sabotage anything, I just stopped being the human backup system. We'll see you for this, he sputtered. I smiled thinly. For what? Not working for free after you fired me? Good luck with that. Now, if you'll excuse me, as I mentioned, I have an interview to prepare for. As I closed the door on Mike's desperate face, I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a profound sense of closing a chapter. Through the window, I watched him stand there, defeated, before trudging back to his luxury car, a man realizing too late the value of what he discarded. The morning after Mike's desperate visit, I woke to an email from Lawrence Davidson, CEO of our biggest competitor. Jack, I've been following the Richardson meltdown. I'd like to discuss an opportunity. Breakfast tomorrow. We met at a quiet diner on the edge of town. Lawrence, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, didn't waste time on pleasantries. I want to offer you Chief Systems Architect position, full benefits, stock options, 30% salary increase. I nearly choked on my coffee. Why me specifically? Lawrence's expression darkened. Because I've been watching Richardson implode from the inside. My nephew Ryan works in their maintenance department. Ryan? The name hit me like a thunderbolt. Ryan is your nephew. He nodded. He's kept me informed for months, especially about Mike Bennett's activities. Lawrence slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were printed emails between Mike and venture capital firm Apex Partners. My stomach churned as I read. Bennett's been planning your termination for 6 months, Lawrence said quietly. He convinced the board your systems were unnecessarily complex designed to make you indispensable. I flipped through document after document, feeling sick. Mike had systematically undermined me, blocked my documentation requests, even rejected critical updates, creating a paper trail that made me look incompetent. The private equity owners wanted to dress Richardson up for quick sale, Lawrence continued. Bennett promised he could slash IT costs by 40% by replacing you. They never expected systems collapse. A memory flashed Mike requesting detailed walkthroughs of every system last January, taking meticulous notes while complimenting my work. It hadn't been admiration, it had been reconnaissance. Why show me this? I asked, my voice hollow. Because Richardson is collapsing, and Westfield Property, the biggest client, approached us yesterday about taking over their 10,000-unit portfolio. Lawrence leaned forward. I need someone who understands Richardson's architecture to help with the transition. I stared at him, the implications sinking in. You're poaching their biggest client. I'm potentially acquiring what's left of Richardson itself within 6 months, Lawrence added. At pennies on the dollar. My mind reeled. The systems I'd built weren't just failing, they were collapsing the entire company. Thousands of employees would lose jobs. Residents would face disruption. This wasn't what I wanted, I whispered. Lawrence's expression softened. You didn't cause this, Jack. They're short-sightedness dead. I'm offering you a chance to rebuild those systems properly with adequate resources and respect for your expertise. As I sat there, phone buzzing with more desperate calls from Richardson, I realized the revenge I'd thought I was getting was nothing compared to what fate had in store. I hadn't just been discarded, I'd been deliberately sabotaged by a man who never understood what he was breaking. When do I start? I asked. How about right now? Lawrence smiled, sliding a contract across the table. 6 months into my role at Davison Systems, I stood at my office window overlooking the city. The view from the executive floor still felt surreal. My desk phone rang. It was Lawrence. Jack, they've accepted our offer. Richardson Housing is officially ours. I exhaled slowly. For 20 cents on the dollar. Exactly. Lawrence's voice carried a hint of satisfaction. And the board wants you to lead the integration team, Chief Integration Officer with a seat on the executive committee. After hanging up, I sank into my chair, memories washing over me. The day after accepting Lawrence's offer, Richardson's systems had suffered a catastrophic cascade failure. Their automated payment processing corrupted the tenant database, marking thousands of accounts as delinquent and triggering eviction notices. The press had a field day. Housing giant's tech nightmare leaves tenants in limbo. I'd watched from afar as Mike Bennett's LinkedIn status changed from chief technology officer to technology consultant to finally seeking new opportunities. His desperate voicemails had eventually stopped coming. A knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. Ryan Lawrence's nephew and now my senior systems analyst entered with a grin. Just heard the news. How's it feel to own the company that threw you away? I shook my head. I never wanted revenge, Ryan, not really. Could have fooled me, he laughed. You're like some technical karma ninja. That night, I drove past Richardson's headquarters, soon to be sold off as part of the acquisition. The building looked tired, half the windows dark. I thought back to my first day there, 20 years ago, when Henry Richardson himself had shown me around the tiny office with 2 aging computers. Build me something that'll last, Jack, he'd said. And I had until the wrong people decided they knew better. At home, I poured myself a scotch and opened my laptop. An email from Tyler Richardson, Henry's son who'd sold to private equity, sat in my inbox. Jack, I owe you an apology. My father always said you were the backbone of the company. I should have listened. I've learned an expensive lesson about valuing the wrong kind of expertise. I thought about responding, but closed the laptop instead. Some bridges couldn't be rebuilt and didn't need to be. The next morning, I walked into the Richardson building for the first time since being escorted out. Lawrence had arranged a town hall with the remaining employees' nervous faces looking up as I took the stage. Many of you know me, I began. For those who don't, I'm Jack Wheeler. I built most of the systems that run this company, and then I was let go because someone thought they could do better cheaper. The room was silent. I'm not here to gloat or settle scores. I'm here because these systems matter. The people who depend on them matter. And you, the people who have been struggling to keep things running, you matter. I spotted familiar faces, people who'd worked under me for years. Some couldn't meet my eyes. Others nodded slightly. We're going to rebuild the right way, with proper documentation, adequate staffing, and respect for institutional knowledge. No one's job is at risk if you're willing to be part of the solution. Later that afternoon, I found myself in my old office, now occupied by a harried young woman surrounded by monitors displaying air codes. Mr. Wheeler, they said you'd be stopping by. She looked exhausted. I'm Jessica. I've been trying to fix the tenant portal for weeks. I smiled. Call me Jack, and let me show you something about how these systems were designed. As I walked her through the architecture I created years ago, I felt a weight lifting. This wasn't about revenge. It was about building something that would last, something better than bitterness. That evening, I drove past Mike Bennett's house. His luxury car was gone, replaced by a for sale sign. I felt no satisfaction, just a hollow recognition of how quickly fortunes could change. I never sought revenge. I simply built something better elsewhere and let the results speak for themselves. The universe had delivered its own justice, more complete than anything I could have orchestrated. Sometimes winning isn't about watching others lose, it's about finding yourself exactly where you're valued, doing what you do best. I never planned this outcome, but watching it unfold taught me something profound. Those who value only cost-cutting and quick fixes inevitably pay a steeper price. The systems we build, whether in technology or relationships, need proper care, documentation, and respect for experience. My victory wasn't in Richardson's downfall, but in finding a place where my knowledge was valued. As I walked through those familiar halls, now under new ownership, I felt no desire to gloat. The sweetest vindication wasn't watching them fail, it was succeeding on my own terms. Maybe this is what Dad meant, I thought, remembering my father's words from childhood. Success isn't about making others lose, it's about staying true to what you know is right, even when no one else sees it. In the quiet of my office, I finally deleted Mike's last desperate voicemail. Some lessons cost more than others, but they're never wasted if you learn from them.